couple years ago, well, last year, maybe that's where I'll start, I wanted to get out of this line of work. I wanted to be home near my kids, and I was like, well, I'm going to start an art supply store because I'm sick of the fact that there's no art supply stores around here where I live. Everyone's nodding because yes. And just for context, I live in Situate, Massachusetts, so it's about an hour from here, a little more than an hour. And it was always frustrating for me that I had to go into Boston or buy things online. Basically, our whole vision is to channel art supplies into the right place. And of course, there's like an eco-friendly spin to that. There's an art estate spin to that. But I just never loved the idea of living in a place that I couldn't get art supplies readily, knowing that there were art supplies languishing in people's homes, in my own home, and just kind of taking up space and not being put to good use. So that's how this all started. And there's a few things that we do at the Spare Studio. The main thing that we do, and it's kind of our primary source of revenue, is we are a secondhand art supply store. So we've got 3 studios in a building in Rockland, which used to be a shoe factory. And that shoe factory back in the 80s or 90s was converted into artist studios. And there's about 80 practicing artists in the building. And just in the past couple of years, they want to try to turn the first floor more into like artist services or a place that has more of a retail element to it so that people feel like they can come into the building, use it as a service, think of it as a community hub rather than just a place where artists kind of go and retreat. So kind of like a little bit more in line with like what Hatch Street Studios is doing. Like you guys are always have always done a really good job of like inviting the community into that space and thinking about it as a place for artists to join and connect. So when I was struggling looking for a place to rent and thinking about the reality of having to rent a space for $2,400 a month with a 3-year committed lease and insurance and all this stuff, they came to my rescue and they were like, come here and get a studio here. So I have. Oh my gosh! Yeah.
You're fine.
That's brilliant. Hopefully that helps. Yeah. So we've got 3 studios. Studio 1 is a fine art supply store. So we've got a lot of oil paints, any kind of paint, surfaces, different types of either dry media, colored pencils, charcoals, whatever, really anything. I've never had someone come into the store asking for something and me saying we don't have that. We have tools, we've got tape, we really have anything that a fine art artist would need in this particular studio. The second studio that we have is still kind of under construction, but people can come in there and purchase things anyway. And it's a kind of like pay by the pound model, and in there are things like papers, chewed up crayons, like partially used paint pans, different types of things that don't really have like an intrinsic value or dollar value that someone would look at and say, I need to buy that. It's more like, let me put this into a pile of things that I might use, and then let's walk out of the store with this. A lot of things in that second studio we give away for free. And we have this philosophy of we're just going to give away anything free to teachers. As long as it goes into the hand of a child, they can take it. So if a teacher came in, and actually this happened recently, a teacher came in and she's a high school teacher, and she was like, I really want most students to experience the feel of a kneaded eraser, but I'm in an area where, we don't have a lot of funding, and they're not going to have that experience. And I was like, just take all the erasers. She came in, she like swooped her hands and she took all the kneaded erasers. Great. That's what we want, because then the next day we get 3 more. There's just an endless supply of these things. And then Studio 3 is, let me see if I missed anything on Studio 2. Studio 2 is also going to be a pay what you want makerspace. So you can come in and maybe you're working on a project, or you want to just like feel what oil paint feels like, and you've never smelt it, you've never felt the texture of it. Come in, do that, pay what you want, leave. So that particular studio, hoping will be staffed by kind of like docent artists, so people that can be in there practicing their own art, and also when someone comes in, be able to be a knowledgeable resource for someone that has a question about any kind of art supply or material. Studio 3 is in a dark basement, and there's a ghost down there. His name is Harry. He's good energy. He's got good energy, but he scared me once. And that has more like manufacturing offcuts or large pieces of cardboard or fabric samples, sculptural things. So it's larger pieces and things that kind of like have a question mark hanging over them, and it takes the right creative to come in there and be like, I need that particular rug sample because I need it for my jelly print making or whatever. So again, everything is free for teachers, and then for the general consumer, it's like 50% off retail prices. So that's the store. The second thing we do is creative reuse opportunities. So this was an event that we did a couple weeks ago at the Boston Children's Museum, and basically it's teaching people about resilient making. I say people, even though it's a lot of times like geared towards kids, but we had an event last week actually where it was multi-generational and everyone was contributing. But basically it's turning trash into treasure, so finding, so I think I talked about this pen has value even if the pen doesn't work. We have a pile of dead markers, we call them spent markers, and we're going to come up with something to make with them. So we keep all these things in order to then see a purpose for them in the future. In these types of opportunities and these activities, I bring in some of the values that I learned in design strategy, problem solving, design thinking, collaborative creativity. Those are the types of things that I'm trying to teach with these creative reuse opportunities. And we've done lots of different events. And then the last thing that we kind of focus on is trying to be supportive and part of a circular economy system. So, for example, I get a ton of art books. These are all amazing art books. Like, oh my gosh, I was like, do you have any Taschen in here? Like, I'm gonna take that one, but everything else. So, being a part of a system that allows people to channel their stuff purposefully into the right places. So in the same building, we've got a used bookstore, we've got a free kids clothing exchange, 100% free. So we are trying to just kind of spread those values. But essentially, again, when it comes back to the idea of artist estates, it's just knowing that your stuff's going to a place that you want it to be, and not just like, Sobeys has its value, and Goodwill has its value, but sometimes it can feel just sort of like a black hole that you're dumping your stuff into, and all that. So that's who we are in a nutshell. Next, I'm going to talk about. Here's our store. Maybe I'll hand this around, and this is Studio 1. This is the hallway because we're like so tiny, we're spilling into the hallway, and then this is Studio 2. So feel free to just kind of take a look. We try to source all of our furniture from Facebook Marketplace, donations, and we even have the oil paint rack that we have is a repurposed Liquitex acrylics rack, so that we got at Artists and Craftsmen's in Saugus when they closed down. So, yeah. So we really try to keep it cheap and local. And creative, exactly. And cheap's not the right word, but you know what I mean. We're trying to do things in a way that's supporting the local economy. All right, so how do we source our art supplies? The first one is, and the biggest one, is individual donations. So we become a choice for people to offload their art supplies. Oftentimes, we're sometimes the first destination for people, but oftentimes we're like the last destination, where it's like, okay, I've given away all the things that I would like to my good friend who's an artist. She's taken all the best acrylics, or we're closing down the studio, and so like we want to give it to the right people, and so here's what's left over. And then whatever's left over, honestly, sometimes I'm just amazed by what people drop off. This is an example of some items that was donated by an artist named Jenna, and Jenna's mom is also an artist. When Jenna started getting into her own art practice, which is fish printing and like kind of mixed media embellishments around the fish printing, her mom's friends got really excited. They're like, oh, she's really getting into art, we're going to give some art materials and supplies, and also just her being a budding artist with a great following and success, she became kind of a magnet for a lot of supplies. And great, but she doesn't paint in oils, she doesn't do plein air necessarily, so she wanted to find a place to be able to drop all this stuff up. Her kids are growing, she doesn't need all these markers anymore. So oftentimes when we get individual donations, it's just from people, practitioners, but also people that are sort of like these magnets for art supplies. And they're just like, I took it because I felt guilty not taking it, or I took it because, I thought maybe I would use it one day. Turns out I'm not going to. So in terms of what you can do as an artist, you can come into the store at any time and bring your donations. I'm very much in the yes and phase with taking donations, so there's not a lot that I'll turn down. But right now I'm not taking like photo albums, frames, and fibers because I don't have the space, unfortunately. All right, the next one is how we source our materials and art supplies is community offloads. So we partner with like local businesses and organizations to essentially be that collector of items, and then they bring it to us en masse. These are boxes, two of I think about 10 boxes that we got from Plymouth Public Schools through an organization called Sustainable Plymouth. And Sustainable Plymouth used to collect art supplies from Plymouth Public Schools quarterly, or maybe two times a year, and give it to Staples, and basically recycle it through Staples. When they found out about the spare studio, they said, instead of bringing it to Staples, can we bring it to you? And I was like, yes. So they got all those boxes in. We tested the markers. I would say 90% of them worked. We would get full boxes of brand new crayons. I'm like, why are these going into these bins? I don't care. They're here now. You're safe. You're going to go back out there into the world. So, I don't ask questions. I just look at the supplies and materials and make sure that they go to the right spot. But we're now going to be collaborating with Hanover Public Schools through Hanover FACE, which is the family and community engagement groups. And then also we partner with local businesses to host these community offload events where people come in and basically, we'll have like a little creative reuse activity or opportunity set up, and then people can come in and drop off their materials, learn a little something about their art supplies. So another way you can work with us is to collaborate with us on a community event or just a system for collecting art supplies. A little more in line with kind of the ethos of these talks is this idea of studio cleanouts. So I have a service called Studio Stewardship, where basically I will come in and help you clean out a loved one's studio or your own studio. If you want to keep the supplies, then there's a fee. But if you don't want to keep the supplies, then I'll just take the stuff. So here's an example of a studio cleanout that I did in Marshfield of a woman who was an acrylic painter and mixed media artist. She worked large, and I'm talking large. I think like one of the canvases that I had to fit into my van was like a 40 by 60 canvas, and I was just like, okay, this is cool. I thought as soon as I was walking into the building event, someone was like, can I have that? I'm like, yes. So anyway, she was moving abroad, and she wanted to ensure again that her materials and supplies were going into the right place. Now, how a lot of people find out about me is first they'll contact like an arts nonprofit and ask them like, hey, I have all this stuff, do you want to take it? Or they'll contact a school or an art teacher that they know. Now again, sometimes the art teachers or these nonprofits can take these supplies, but they don't necessarily have the resources or the space to go in, organize, make sense of things, all of that. So that's where I come in. I kind of like pick up the slack, or if they know that the studio cleanout is just too hefty of a lift, then I'll just come in and do the thing. So I've done several studio cleanouts. Most of them are they'll end up saying, just take everything, and I'm like, I will take everything. And, and it's going to go to the right place. And I think because I work in product development, like I love products. Me and Ron have talked about this. Like I love brand histories. I love like packaging and all that stuff. So whenever I'm going through the studio, it's like, oh my gosh, this is like a 1960s, and they're just like, what? Like I didn't even know that I had that. So sometimes it can feel therapeutic, it's a little bit of a relief knowing that these things are going into the hands of someone that kind of knows a little bit about the art materials and supplies. A lot of these are used canvases. We'll take used canvases too. We take everything. So in terms of studio cleanouts, like you can hire us to come and clean out the studio, or to catalog what you've got and create kind of an inventory of the art with supplies and materials that you have, or we can take the items for reselling. And then the last thing that we do in terms of resourcing or sourcing our stuff is manufacturing waste. So this is from a sign company in Plymouth called Zebra Visuals, and that's how I met Ampy, and that's how I met Ron. Zebra Visuals is really awesome. They, in fact, they started out in the Wright building before they expanded and went to their own spot in Plymouth. She had these letters that had a little bit of adhesive on it, and it was like unacceptable to her standards. She was like, take them. We get offcuts of gator board from them, cardboard, really interesting high quality pieces of like surfaces, Sintra board. So we work with several businesses to get some of these materials. Another example is there was a keyboard manufacturer in Weymouth. I think they're still around, but they had a ton of high density rubberized foam, and I just took it out. I shoved it all into my little car and took it back, and I was just like, what am I going to do with this? And it was stacked high. I took up all the space in the studio, and then I had a printmaker come in and say like, yep, this is exactly what I need to teach kids how to print. So off it goes back into the community. We're also thinking of doing, there's a creative reuse center in Austin that's really prolific. They're called Austin Creative Reuse, but they do things like fashion shows and like really cool stuff. They do a quarterly challenge. Like if they get a bunch of something, then they put it out to the community and they say, what can we do with this? And also I think it's a great opportunity for kids that want to get into, that are like, in STEAM-oriented groups to learn about product development that way. I keep trying to push the idea that these rubberized foam pieces can be like a podcast booth, but nobody's running with it. So, yeah. Oh my gosh, let's talk. All right, so how do we organize our supplies? Here's just an example of, most of the labor is myself, and then I have a couple of folks that are just really passionate about art supplies that come in and help me organize, including my mother-in-law, love her to death. But we also work with people that the skill level matches the work. So we work with a group called Launch, and it's a group for adults with intellectual disabilities, and it's a vocational arm. So they come in and they help sort art supplies every other Monday. Soon it's going to be every Monday because that's how loaded up with art supplies we are. So here's an example. This is from today. These are some crayons that we got in, and it's a mix of like Crayolas and all this stuff, but it's got everything. They come in, they know their job. They know that they're there to sort by color or by type, and they do the work. And we have a lot of fun. We're like launching crayons across the room. They get sorted into these lovely bins. We keep a handful of them in the room for then people to use in that makerspace capacity, but then you've got an overflow of this stuff. My philosophy, and I'm hoping that this is possible, is I don't want to hoard these things. If I don't want it in the basement, I want it out in the community. So we're, again, trying our best to get it out and in functional use. But the last thing, too, is that I'm also teaching, and they're teaching me about special colors, for example. Crayola has like retired crayons that have some monetary value. So let's like pay attention, not just to the color, but also like the name and the way that the label looks. Oh, this one looks different. Why does it have a kid's name on it? Oh, interesting. That was from the year that, a child was able to name it. So we're learning about, the genesis of different types of colors and all that stuff. So it's really fun. But I do a lot of deep research into products. I make sure that things are priced effectively, so it's not just kind of like blanket pricing across. And I have a lot of fun with it. That's like my favorite part, is the organizing. Oh, that was it. So yeah.
This video was proudly sponsored by the Southcoast Artist Index. If you want to know more information, go to theartistindex.com.